episode of the Quest for Excellence series brought to you by Intellectus Consulting. Friends, by now I'm sure all of you are aware that the Quest for Excellence series is synonymous with raising the standards of marketing and commercial excellence in our industry. It aspires to not only raise the standards of marketing excellence, but also foster great learnings through shared experiences of business leaders in our industry. These industry leaders come with a plethora of skills and diverse experiences across functional domains such as marketing excellence, brand building excellence, leadership excellence, commercial excellence, and strategy excellence. They have spent years in our pharmaceutical industry honing these skill sets and applying these skills in their work, and at the same time sharing these skills with their teams who have been working with them in every organization that they have been associated with. What's more important, these business leaders have achieved benchmarks of excellence in their respective functions. Intellectus Consulting, in its humble endeavor, aspires to bring these learnings to the fore so that the leaders can share these learnings with the audience in the most candid and forthright manner. We have had leaders across different organizations who have come to our platform and have shared their life experiences and learnings for the benefit of our viewers. These experiences have been captured not only as the interview series of the Quest for Excellence that is available on our dedicated YouTube channel, but they're also available in the form of podcasts in both the Spotify and Anchor apps. In continuation with our theme, today we have a new guest for our series. Our guest is an industry veteran who has spent over 35 years in the pharmaceutical industry. He has had tremendous experience across functional domains of sales, sales management, commercial excellence, marketing, and overall commercial operations. My guest for today is Mr. Kamalesh Kalidasan, who is the Senior Vice President for Emerging Therapies Cluster for Cipla. Kamalesh is one of the most experienced and well-known professionals in our industry for over 35 years now. He started his career way back in 1990 as a medical representative in the erstwhile Fulford Limited. Many of our colleagues would remember that Fulford was a small yet highly specialized dermatology care business company and was one of the respected leaders in the field of dermatology. With a very sizable sales stint, Kamalesh grew through the ranks of the organization, quickly assuming increasing roles and responsibilities such as area manager, regional manager, and national sales manager in a span of 15 years. Kamalesh also saw through the integration of Fulford with Schering-Plough in the mid-2000s and became the director for the primary care business of Schering-Plough, which integrated the erstwhile Fulford business as well as the acquired business of Organon. From this position, he drove commercial operations for the combined entity and was extremely successful, so much so that he went on to assume additional responsibility of the Sri Lankan operations. Kamalesh is a veteran sales management and a born leader, and I've had the privilege of personally knowing Kamalesh since we worked together as colleagues in different streams during the years of 2006 to 2011. With the merger with Merck Sharp and Dohme, MSD, in 2011, Kamalesh went on to handle the overall diversified brands portfolio of the new MSD in India. And from there on, went from strength to strength, assuming higher roles and responsibilities in strategic marketing as well as commercial excellence. Kamalesh has worked with the entire organization, starting from full food to Sharing Plow to MST for more than 25 years. And after a great successful stint, decided to change his organization and then join Cipla. It's been an outstanding ride once again for Kamlesh in Cipla, knowing his core functional competencies as well as his ability of great leadership skills that I have known he possesses. Today, Kamlesh is the Senior Vice President of Emerging Therapies of Cipla, which includes those by chronic care business of diabetes and cardiovascular, as well as subchronic therapies. It's my pleasure to have Kamlesh on this episode today, where I believe that the rich vignettes of his sales experience will go a long way in helping marketeers understand the nuances of all the functions that he has been associated with. So without much further ado, let's get on to the conversation with Kamalesh Kalidasan. My first question, 3.5 decades is a long time, Kamlesh. And have you ever had a chance to pause, reflect, and say, oh my God, I've got 30 plus years. Time has just flown by. So I just wanted to know, have you ever had a chance to reflect, pause, and see where your humble beginnings in 1990 and now in 2021?
I think you have given me an opportunity right now also, Sarish. I think it's been some time since we have been going back. Whenever we write a resume, we do go back. That's the first time when you try to see what you have achieved. But it's actually natural for any person like you and me to keep a repository of what has happened and what are the learnings across. I think we always reflected back when it comes to thinking about our next assignment, because what are learnings which I have done in the past, I know that it's not going to help you the next assignment, but surely it's going to help you give the confidence to take up the next assignment. We do have a chance to get reflected back.
And when you reflect back, do you do it in overall terms, or is it in terms of specific evolution of your skill sets, say sales management or marketing? Business? Specific,
exactly. So first is that I would say that 30 years is too long, and you can find that it cannot be summed up in a minute. But I can sum it up in say about 3 minutes. There are two different angles to this. One is the first part of my career was in sales, and it was in the multinational. And the second part of the career was actually not the second part. The last part of it is more the domestic market and in the leadership role also, in the marketing also. I just see this. If I had to just recollect, I just draw a word cloud of two different types. One word cloud is actually of the multinational atmosphere or environment. The other word cloud is more of the domestic environment. If I had to recollect, what are those word clouds? What are those big words which come in a multinational organization? Is morely global, having patents, scientific data, clinical research, hardcore strategy, documentation, compliance, having a strategic approach, defining treatment guidelines, engagements, execution frameworks. Why am I talking about these words is these are the ones which echo across all levels. It's not that it echoes to me, but in the boardrooms and in the office rooms and in the team under, with the customer also the same words echo. Similarly, if you go into a kind of a Indian multinational domestic environment, you will find that more of local approvals, behaviors are more aggressive, flexibility, innovation is actually one thing which comes up very clearly when it comes to domestic players, because it's a place where people would like to innovate. They got the liberty to innovate. They got a sponsorship to innovate. Tactical frameworks. Timing is actually the biggest word you hear in domestic environment. Is it the right time to launch? Are you late or you are actually right on time? Quick wins, more of P&L, gross margins, and at the same time campaign specific ones. So you can find that these two word clouds, I've given a little bit more words, but if you put it like, no, you have to actually adapt to these. Under this, if I had to draw the sales and marketing, it's all going to be the same. Whether you're in a sales or a marketing, in both these word clouds, you should know how to adapt to each other. And if you have to win, I think you have to absorb those words personally and try to deliver it in any level, group product manager or a brand manager or a business unit head. It has to happen in that manner. I think the ideal situation I had, as you rightly said, is having an exposure of both these word clouds, both in multinational and in Indian. At the same time, the sales and marketing also have got an equivalent exposure in terms of both these places. So it's actually a big blessing for me. And I'm sure that both these rooms don't communicate similarly. There is an intersection. Having said that, it's not that no, there is no intersection. There is an intersection when it comes to strategy or when it comes to execution. It does come to an execution, but the total way of thinking is different. You have to actually change yourself in these cases. So ideally speaking, for marketing professionals, I would say that no, that all these four quadrants are going to be important for them to touch base in some part of their career to have a complete picture of how you can actually proceed into your next level of competence.
Fantastic, fantastic, Kamlesh. To hear that coming from the leader of one of India's most respected companies, it's very good to hear this. And I've taken a liking for that nice jargon, not a jargon exactly, but a nice word called word clouds, right?
Yeah.
We store data on the cloud, but I now have to store words on the
Yeah.
word cloud. No, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, because the terminologies, the processes that we keep using in our days when we work together, also in our MNC frameworks, with all that strategy, positioning, etc., go to market model. Like, whereas you go to the Indian organizations, it's more of speed, agility, tactical stuff, P&L, right? Uh, just one point, and it was interesting comment you made, which it took my attention, is they are separate word clouds, as you rightly said, but they have an intersection, right? In terms of execution, etc., and that is something which is important. So you have seen both sides, Kamlesh. So definitely your ability to contribute and add value to the current business of domestic will obviously leverage on your learnings that you had in the MNC framework, right? So you will borrow those learnings heavily and put it into the next word cloud framework of the Indian organization. Does that happen, or you still operate
No.
compartmentalized?
It's slightly different, Shailesh. It's a good question. Like, no, you captured it well. Actually, I also expected it to be the same. But when I was in a multinational space, the tendency of having groomed by global organization, the support of international marketing, and also the regional marketing leads, everything is ready-made, right? When it comes to I think if I have to explain it, how easy it is in a multinational, you never realize as long as you're in a multinational. How difficult it is in domestic business and how richness is there in domestic business, you don't realize when you're in a multinational. For example, if I had to say, like, no, it starts from finished product when it comes to multinational. The product is before you, and it is actually you're going to buy. You're like a distributor. You're going to buy the product, use the strategy. It is just like any distributor-based environment. The strategy is written. You have to sell it. Only thing is that you have to sell it the way the multinational wants it to sell. We call it as compliance. Like, no, they are very strict about how they operate. This environment, as long as you're there, you're guarded, groomed, you're directed, and just have to do what is actually being spelled out. The specific of local characteristics of the country come within, and that's where we play a part to align the whole strategy of global to local market. And as long as we are in the world where I spend most of the time, I never realized that it's so tough outside, or probably it's so rich outside. The moment I took a step, I took my own daring step, saying that okay, enough of multinational, let's get into generic and try to, as you rightly said, walk on the sock with the socks in the slush and try to get things done. When we entered there, I found that the vocabulary or the kind of expectations are huge, and you will not believe it starts from probably product conceptualization to designing the packaging to understanding who the vendor is going to be to understand the capacity of how much is going to be, how the gross margins differs in terms of capacity, the different pricing which you're going to do, the discounting mechanism. Apart from that, when it comes to you, it's also the question of like, no, how well you are poised to make a differentiation. It's in-house or P2P or loan licensing. And then after that, when the finished goods come to you, you start looking at the strategy based on the finished product which comes to you. It's actually a post graduation for me. Let me tell you, for the first 5 or 6 months when I entered into a domestic organization, the words which were I said the word cloud is a very good kind of a definition. It's totally different. The question which was asked to me sometimes where like, no, do you know the capacity of the plant which is getting manufactured? I was thinking, why the hell I should know about the capacity of the plant which is required? No, the capacity is required because you should know the batch size. Batch size is required because you should know the shelf life. Shelf life, if it is going to be, if your volumes are less and shelf life is going to be less, you've got a bigger issue in terms of expiries. So that's the level you get into. So I think the multinational space talks about more about strategy, structured, organized kind of a way how you can launch. But I should say that no, that competition is limited there. You are a king there because if it is a patented brand, still you own the space. But when it comes to Indian organization, it's really trying to get that small bit working for you to make the big difference. And that's where I think that innovation is more in Indian organizations. And at the same time, richness of the complete commercialization of a brand is more there. And if you're actually starting in a brand management in an Indian organization, he's a worthy enough person for him to move to a multinational space because he knows much more better than the curriculum which has been shared there in the place. Vice versa, it's actually going to be difficult, but if you are actually having the interest, you can adapt to it very nicely. So, but both these spaces, my expectation of myself and the marketeers are that you should vet yourself equivalently in both these spaces because it's different worlds altogether.
Brilliant, Kamlesh. I mean, you've just kind of set the context very well. Essentially, if I had to summarize what you've said, yeah, MNCs, as we know, we spend our lives for a very structured working environments, compliance, frameworks, etc. And whereas you don't have so much of a structured environment in Indian organizations, but where there is very lot of freedom, flexibility, innovation, on the fly, agility is more there. And the terminologies, as you rightly said, are very different. You talk more of strategic things here. You're talking about batch size and, COGS and gross margins. And, can you squeeze out that extra 1%? Do you really to give 1% in distribution margins? I learned that the hard way. I mean, 2011 till 2015, for the last 4 years of my active corporate career, were in Indian organizations. And it was a very different beast, very different way of working. And the deliverables were different in a way, as you rightly said. The deliverables were more on the profit numbers. It's more on the margins, and whereas we will talk about brands and equity.
Yeah.
But it's nice. And have you been able to now make peace? I mean, working from structured to unstructured, speed and agility. It's been 6 years for you now.
100%. It took around, I think, the adaptability. Normally, any person who gets into this world with passion, I think he should be able to get adaptable within 4 months' time. But you should have the keenness to understand the kind of organization you're working for. Most of the domestic formulation industry operates in the similar manner. In fact, some are quite exaggerated. Some are there is a P&L in multinational for only 4 lines, 4 rows. But if you come to a P&L of a domestic organization, it might be around about close to 15 to 20 line items. So you'll find the kind of leverages you have to get from each item is totally different. And so it gets some time to adapt, but it's quite interesting that actually speaking, the theory is so nice to learn about it. It takes 4 to 5 months to get adapted.
Right. Would it be fair to say, Kamlesh, as a message from you to our marketeers community who not only comprise of MNC but Indian marketeers, that if you want to make this transition, then what you're saying and what I'm getting from you is, I think 2 or 3 very important attributes. One is the flexibility, second is adaptability, and third is agility, because all
Absolutely.
are extremely demanding in Indian environments. You need to be very adaptable, flexible, speed. There is no structured way of working every day. Like I mentioned, you may have to drop some priority because there is something else that just come. Suppose suddenly a product comes under price control, leave everything, look at the price control impact, NLEM impact. And I've seen that happen, right?
Absolutely, it happens.
Multitasking becomes extraordinarily important at a very feverish pace. So I think you would agree, Kamlesh, that these
absolutely. These are, and at the same time, I would suggest if a transition is happening from a multinational level to an Indian organization, it's better to take at least around about 2 months before a mentor who can actually guide you on this transition. Because if you're dropping yourself in a parachute there, it's going to be quite tough to actually cope up. So you can actually, it's easier from this side to the other side. But from multinational to domestic organization, it's better to take a mentor who's been there, who's a friend of yours. Try to understand the various metrics which they are using there. It's not only about the SFA metrics, but also in terms of the P&L metrics and the kind of backend which happens when it comes to commercialization of brands. It's very much necessary.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. No, that's a very good point, Kamlesh. And there's another message, mentorship, to help make a successful transition. I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
Let's now get into a discussion, which I'm sure you will also would love to have, is turning the clock back in those initial years, say 1990 to 2006, where you started off with a small but very well-known organization called Fulford India Limited, which is very dear to your heart, and I'm sure it will stay with life for you because you built that organization from the scratch. No doubt about it, right? And it created a differentiated name for itself in the pharma industry in the field of primary care products like Quadriderm, Dipsalate, Dipgenta. My question to you, Kamlesh, is when you were in the sales function selling and promoting these brands, and then when we met way back in 2006 for the first time in head office, I was in marketing, you were also had come into a head office role. And that time was when we got integrated into a outfit called Sharing Plow, right? The way of managing brands was different. How do you think was the brand building process different in the old erstwhile Fulford versus the new Sharing Plow? What did you see any differences in which the brands were built, resources were just applying, initial thoughts? Yeah.
I think by nature, Fulford was a multinational because of the reason it was an affiliate, but it had the essence of multinational during the time, and that's why it was actually very famous in the dermatological space. So I would say that no, that Fulford to Sharing Plow was little bit of a transition only, but from Sharing Plow to Merck Sharp and Dome was a larger piece. I would rate that is actually a big jump.
Okay.
If you have to see the first level of Sharing Plow or even Fulford, it was used to traditionally, I think we had an organization called as TVG, which used to
Yeah.
come and tutor us from abroad, and they used to do the complete brand planning exercise with one single book. I should say that it was a one single book which we have to workbook which we have to fill up, but it made a lot of sense creating a kind of a brand plan at that time around about a day and a half course. But I think the transition took place when it came to Merck Sharp and Dome. I would say that one of the best things which can happen to me is actually learning from Merck about marketing. It was one of the I should say respected marketing companies in the world, and they took their time to come and teach us. I know that it was close to around about for one brand plan we had to take around about 8 days. We had to lock ourselves in Goa in a kind of an hotel in a room and try to move every part of the where to play, how to do, and the kind of modules which they got in every day, wearing shorts, putting the charts all over, no computers being used, taking each and every bit of the information and putting into that room, and then gazing the room with around say about 24 charts, creating the complete brand plan. It was actually a totally different simulation of a kind, calling doctors there itself, calling the rep there itself, bringing the zonal business manager on the third day, trying to understand whether it works. So from a kind of a structured workbook environment, we moved to a simulation environment where we were able to see everything happening before you, and we were able to feel the brand plan working when we create those brand plans. I
Right.
think right now it's moved to a different phase altogether. The phase which we are having right now is actually more towards like no, we know very clearly about the patient funnels, and we know very clearly about the leverage points. It's just a question of finding how do you match to the ecosystem at this point of time. Matching every leverage point to an ecosystem right now is a big post graduation when compared to that of. So I think understanding leverage points, positioning, behavioral objectives, execution matrix strategy is all done. It's a very common kind of a theory which everybody knows now. But fitting it to the current world is actually the most difficult part because the need for capabilities are huge, and you should be having a multi-centric approach in terms of thinking, which is of
Right.
a huge expectation from the market is right.
Right. No, I think what you rightly said, that the huge step of transition or step change from sharing to MSD, because the Merck way of marketing was completely different as compared to what we had groomed for the 5 years in sharing. And that was a huge learning for all of us in terms of brand building principles, with deep insights and, looking at the market from a 360-degree and bringing that plan to life is from your standpoint. I'm keen to know, you had such rich sales background, and sales gives you a great understanding of demand generation, customer understanding, deep insights on their behaviors, etc. You come into a head office based position and get into a role of marketing, and that too within Merck. You were fortunate, and obviously you also got into that. When you look back now, Kamlesh, that initial excuse me, stint as a director of marketing, did you bring your learnings of the field and sales into the brand planning process? And if so, can you tell our audience how did it really, help at one level to get all the pieces together so that the richness of knowledge stayed, in that planning process? If you can help us.
Thanks for asking this question because I think it's easier for a marketing person to get into sales right now in this current world because he can ask for it. Like, no, he can say to his boss, I need a sales experience. And that doesn't mean that he wants a full-fledged sales experience. He needs to understand what sales operations like, and he wants it to be a part of the resume. That's a kind of an ask right now. At the same time, if a salesperson asks for a marketing position, normally the entries are quite restricted because he's a tactical guy who has been used to doing sales. Marketing requires a different thought process altogether. So I think it's difficult to swim this side. It's easier to swim the other side, first part. So I had a chance because you need some kind of a person who understands. I think especially from the sales side, people also should have good marketing mentors who are able to sense that this person is able to think marketing at least. Like, no, he's able to dissect everything and try to manage things separately rather than as a whole. I think previously we used to have internal management associates, a kind of a career path. Right now, you will find that the career paths are quite restricted. It's just jumping 6 months of MR experience, and after that they become brand managers. After that, they try to move it across. In my stint, when I was moving from a sales manager to a marketing head, I felt that I had enough in me to actually take it up because one is a passion, and second is also that we had a lot of instincts where we took multiple kind of roles without having the role itself in marketing to design certain things. So we had vetted ourselves into brand planning. These simulations which happen, it is based on our contributions and it's based on the kind of thinking we churn makes you a good marketer. So there's no course for marketers as such. It's a question of a competency which has to be brought alive. And that, if you're able to have the passion to bring it alive and show up, I think it's easier for you to get into the marketing side. But having got into the marketing side, your question of yours, as a director of marketing, it helped me a lot. One is that to make executable strategies. First is it's not about boardrooms and designing strategies there, but it's about whether the last man standing in your organization, I mean, if you're as a BU head also, I always believe if the last person who's standing there is able to talk the brand story of in just around about one sheet of paper or a few lines, that could be the best thing which can happen. The understanding has to be so smooth. This can happen if probably you know what's happening in the clinic. But if it's going to be only the boardrooms, then I'm sure that it's going to be only definition of strategy and the frameworks being cascaded through cycle meetings, but not sensing of whether it can happen or not happen in the doctor's chamber. I think having a sales experience, you are able to filter what will work, what will not work. First thing, it's not that the marketer is not able to do it. If he's having the sales stint in his mind, or if he's actually done a lot of field working, he's actually putting himself into the sales shoes. Even he can do it. It's not that the other person only can do it, but putting yourself into your shoes of the TM to understand whether it can happen is something which is going to be very crucial. Second is how can we make complex things simple is actually one type of communication which is more valued in this, because within right now you can see cycle meetings are happening within 3 hours. You can find previously we had 2 days of cycle meeting, now it's 3 hours. In 3 hours, if you have to communicate say 6 brands, and if you have to communicate the strategies and expect him to buy it and then go and work and come back, you have to make the complex thing simple. You cannot talk about marketing behavioral objectives and all this stuff The jargons cannot be used in his place because he will just go and do back the same thing. So you need to make sure that that simplicity has been brought. And also in that role, I also understood that how to move the word efficiency to effectiveness. We all understand that efficiency is nothing but the motor is running, but the water is not filling in the overhead tank. Like no, it's garam ho raha hai. It's not actually. It's, you know that the motor is running, but it's not filling the. This exactly is this exact learning that that efficiency to effectiveness was actually a great kind of a learning when I moved into this role, because both I was able to do it with care. First, the efficiency comes, and then we moved it to effectiveness. There are a lot of examples for that, but I would stay there by saying that no, in this role, we were able to fit both.
Beautiful. I mean, I was just listening to you with rapt attention. So, to encapsulate what you said, I think the first thing is because of your richness of sales stint and background that you had done, you were clearly, focused on the executability of the strategies that were drawn up by market, which is so nicely said. And I completely agree with this on you, Kamlesh, because if the last man standing on the battlefield is able to articulate that in whatever way is expected, then the strategy will work at the end of the day. I think that's very put by you. Second thing I think you also spoke about is that you're not just focused on the efficiency piece, but translating or transforming it into the effectiveness piece, because that is also something which is extremely important. And when you have both sides of the coin experience, then you are really doing it very well in terms of driving both efficiency and effectiveness. And the third thing that you also said very beautifully is that marketeers need to obviously take into account different pieces of the brand planning and understanding what goes to market, which the sales guys does it in a particular fashion, so that you have the best chance of outcomes or success, is what you have said so nicely. I had a question, and many business leaders like you have said this, that the transition from obviously marketing to sales is very easy because it's considered hallowed, and a sales stint is used as a talent management kind of a progression. Whereas then from sales to marketing, it's difficult. It's not, because he's seen more as an executor, and you're right. I mean but I think you used a word for the third time, which is mentorship. I think what you're communicating, and other good successful leaders have also said on our platform, brand managers need mentors. So you need mentoring at every level, either when you make a transition from one set of an organization to the other. Another type of mentoring is moving across functions, sales to marketing or vice versa. Or third, even taking on additional roles and responsibilities. Do you believe that mentoring is really required in our industry even today, Kamlesh, with so much of change in the landscape? What's your take? Is mentoring
I
really
think the
important?
first, before mentoring, Shailesh, I would say first is you have to jump into it. That's something which happens.
Okay.
Yes, the question is that nobody will be willing to give you the job if you're not trying to make yourselves. You have to make yourselves visible first. Second is you have to try to express at multiple forums that I am interested, keen. I think nowadays in this current world, the titles appear in your mailbox that saying that they're recruiting. You should openly apply and give them a chance for them to see why you should be taken at this point of time. In fact, I would actually say at whatever level you are in your career, which you have to trade it off and try to make the leap. And I made the leap. Typically, when I moved from sales to marketing, I had a leadership position where I had a good amount of diversified team reporting to me. But that leap also had a chance. I had a chance to leap, and I left. And the organizations which are grooming you are very much interested in actually you taking lateral roles also. Any organization will never say no for lateral roles. In fact, they are more happy to take you inside, because first is it is a retention policy of the organization to give you what you want, because otherwise you're going to search for the same kind of roles outside. So first is giving a lateral role helps in terms of the organization to groom people for the future, for the next role, and that leap has to be made by you. Very often I have seen also that like no, in IDPs, when we discuss the marketeers and we say that no, this is not the right time for you to take a sales career, they say yes sir, but still I think like no, I can manage without it. It clearly talks about the individual that he is not interested in making that leap due to so many reasons. So that's something which there are transitional competencies which are required, which cannot be groomed in the kind of levels you are in. A sales guy going to marketing, you cannot groom yourself when you're in sales. You have to go there and have a 6 months transition, prove your worth in around about 2 3 years, and that stint is going to help you to become a view head. So first is both the sides. You should make the leap, and that leap will not come voluntarily to you. You have to ask for it. You have to jump for it, and you have to trade it off. The second thing is when you have decided to do it, I think mentors come easy for you. The mentor who's interested to help you will also be most of the time the one who is willing to give you the job also, because nobody is going to mentor for free because they don't have the time. But if there is a good opportunity that if you are a good sales guy getting into marketing, there is a good chance that he can mentor you and he can get the sales done from you also. Similarly, vice versa. Let's try and understand that you trade off your sales to make sure that you have a kind of a 30 or 40% eye on the sales still, and you can get this thing done. And in fact, you have to tell him also, I can do both, not a problem. You have to make that pitch to the top management, and also at the same time you should find opportunities. I think the more cautious person or the more selfish person who try to do it in his own organization, in his own vertical, because these type of opportunities keep coming, and the mentor appears from nowhere. And any person who is taking you is going to be a mentor because he knows you're capable, and you have the other side of the story right. You're trying to correct this part of the story, and the organization is going to also complement that type of an approach. I think
Beautiful.
first point, you take the leap. Second is
You take
search for something which is actually in the same organization. Moving to a different organization
right.
may actually make risk taking is a little bit higher, because they have got different expectations from you when you actually move from a different organization.
Absolutely. No, very beautifully said, Kamlesh. I completely agree with you. Take the leap first, and then the
Yeah,
mentor will automatically work with you to make you more successful in that new role. Or
absolutely.
very well said. That comes to the piece of discussion, Kamlesh, is uh, your views as now you head both sales and marketing as at a very senior leadership level in Cipla for cluster of businesses. So you have a first-hand experience of evaluating the marketing roles and functions performed by the brand managers and marketing teams of various businesses or brands portfolios. When you see the level of competencies and skills that marketers had in late 90s, early 2000s, even mid 2000s, and today when you see their crop of marketers, my first question is, how are you? Are you happy, satisfied? Do you think they are more evolved, they're smarter, or you think they need more hand holding? Do you see any essential gaps in their competencies or skills? And if so, I mean, if you believe so, what is the reasons you think could be these fundamental endemic weaknesses, and if at all they exist, and how do you think we should as an industry build out their capabilities in marketing, if at all? That's just
So
your
it's a very valid question at this point of time, because the transition as we speak is happening. Like the expectations are different.
right.
For example, if you're going to think about the current world, say about around 3 years back, my answer would have been different. But because you're asking post-COVID times, the answer is going to be totally different, which I never expected that I'll be doing this 2 years back. Let me tell you, the most while we always feel that no, there is a lot of insecurity in the sales function because there is a limitation for him to meet the customer. There's a lot of insecurity in the marketing teams as well. I'm not talking about any organization at this point of time. I'm talking about as in the industry, because we do mentor people and they keep talking to us always. Like every week we get at least 1 or 2 calls. And there is a lot of uncertainty there, because first is that there's a lot of evolution right now which is happening inside the ecosystem itself. Traditionally, very clearly, if I had to take some time to explain to you how, if you go by the typical leverage points of pre-origination where the patient seeks the information from. Previously, it was a retailer. Let me tell you, now it's actually the internet. The patient knows what is the indication, what are the signs and symptoms. The patient also knows how to read an MRI, what are the reports saying, and what that report means, what are the management of this, and he only doesn't know which brand. To the molecular level and diagnosis is very clear. He is reaching the customer with only one objective to make sure that check whether the doctor is writing the same thing or not. So invariably the answer is there. So the doctor is also in a fix. If he writes a different answer, the questions are that no, I think it's different. So you've got a well-read, pre-originated patient who's actually going to make your doctor's life a little bit what do you call I should say that not messy. I should say it's going to put him into a lot of tough situation. The second part is actually like, so the marketer should be, if your customer is going to be the doctor, then it's different story, which was there 3 years back. But now there is actually a patient who is also presumes that that he knows everything what a doctor has actually needed to learn. And right now, let's try and understand remdesivir and tocilizumab or whom even my family members know about it. That's the kind of the words have spread in the COVID that medicine has to be everybody's right to know about what medication is writing there. The second part of it is when it comes to diagnosis. Again, previously they were actually only labs and used to the marketer used to think about getting the labs into their control so that they'll be able to do an activity or a campaign to get it. But right now it's a point of care opportunity. So it's changed. Treatment choices, previously it was actually the way it wanted, but the guidelines are totally new right now. The guidelines are changing based on different versions as it is comes inside. So there are multiple versions of guidelines of how people treat their patients also. When it comes to brands, again, total fulfillment. It's online. It's going to be on the counter. If you're going to think about all this right now, Sailesh, you will find that that previously what was actually a cakewalk in terms of a doctor prescribing retailer to stockist. It's actually a different story altogether. There is an outer ring road, I should say, a digital outer ring road, which is actually reaching. And you have a lot of intersections in the flow chart where you have to solve for if you have to get a leverage point right also. So currently the marketeer should have a lot of capabilities. The usual capabilities which you always talk about is communication or analytical skills or creativity. Yes, that's a given. Like, no. But I think the new emerging ones are like, no, that how good are you in terms of data analytics? It's not about collation of data. You can always put a lot of thrust on getting the data. Even in our profiling systems, when I had worked in my previous organization, we had around close to 22 fields which has to be filled compulsorily for getting the profile. But what you do with the data is going to be more important. So making choices are marketed, so data analytics
Yes.
and at the same time the decision making of meaningful and actionable items which you feel that we can make a major opportunity come up alive is something which is going to be more important. So this is something which you require time. You need also the expertise to get this thing done. Point number one. Point number two, digital skills are the basic terminology now. I think sooner or later you will be having a lot of pharma posts which are coming, like probably a scientific content writer or probably a marketing technologist or something like a chief content officer. It could be data scientist, or it could be something which has to do with a kind of chief like even the person who's working in the market will have a different name. We now call as a digital approach, but he might not be having a territory manager role. So you'll find that here also the word cloud is changing. It's not going to be your PM, senior brand manager, GPMs, but there are going to be multiple items coming inside because this is a spider web. It's actually going to be bigger and bigger. It's just like growing. It's going to go like an internet, and you have to use multiple. So as I said, when in all these leverage points, these intersections have to be qualified. You require different capabilities too. So one is that you cannot become everything. I'm sure that I'm not. It should not be taken that that you have to become multiple, but you should be aware of. So there is a lot of collaboration and also cross-functional teamwork you have to do with agencies to bring in the right kind of capability build up. And at the same time, sitting on the top of the cockpit, you should be able to analyze a real world situation of how these elements are actually helping you in marketing. Currently, as we speak, let me tell you, Shailesh, is that the market is now moving into services of something called as the on-demand technology, which is happening in Zomato's or Swiggy's. Customer services are actually going to be in the on-demand technology, real time, anytime for the doctors. If that happens, then you should understand that the kind of competencies which are required before is going to help you baseline, but you had to have a different set of competencies which are coming here to manage these kind of different, and it's as soon as 3 months down or 6 months down the line, these transitions are going to happen.
I think, Kamlesh, it's so very well said. And I think coming from you, who has been through one phase of selling, one phase of marketing for all the years, you have been compelled to change
Yes,
in this
absolutely.
16 months. So you have to probably unlearn everything that you learned in the last 25 years to a large extent.
Absolutely.
The current normal of COVID 16 months is absolutely uncertain, fraught with changes, high-speed changes, and very uncertain, complex. You have so nothing is certain because it's all the time evolving. And I think what you beautifully said is that it all starts with the patient journey funnel, right? So you don't have the classical funnel anymore.
No,
The patient
it's not
who's
there.
walking into the healthcare system is preconditioned. He knows everything, and he's just endorsing the physician's choice. So I think many leaders, like you have said, that today the entire scenario is different. There is more democratization of the patient. The physician's power has waned quite significantly, and the patient power has risen significantly,
Absolutely.
which is very, very clear. And coming from you is just an endorsement of the same fact. What you also said is that even for terms of fulfillment, adherence, it's so very different than what it was classically when we were doing marketing the old way just about 5 to 6 years ago. And the third piece you have said is that if marketers have to really navigate these times of pandemic, they need to have two very important skills. One is the analytics skills, the data analytics. It is not about getting the data, but what do you do with that data? And second, you've also said the digital and building that ecosystem. I know that Cipla is at the forefront driving a lot of things in the industry for the first time in terms of technology, health, etc. Now, I want to ask you your perspective as a leader. Never before in our history of the industry has technology met health at an intersection so disruptive like never before. The pharma model has got disrupted to a large extent, Kamlesh. You see around, you have e-pharmacy chains which have now called the shots for the last 5 years. There is consolidation happening on that front. You have now online MRI reports getting delivered, and the entire technology and diagnostic stuff is gone out of the window. It's the old ways of doing it is all gone. Then, Kamlesh, you see actors of the world are calling shots with the patients more than the physicians themselves. And today, physicians are dying to get registered on these meta platforms, and times are totally different. And then you look at the on-demand technology, right? Like the Swiggies and the Zomatos, you have even home deliveries which are within 2 hours. Then you have digital wallets to make payments, like the Paytms and the Phone Pays of the world, which have completely done away with the cash. It's all digital. This is disrupted, and you look at supply chain piece of our business, it has got disrupted. Manufacturing to large extent, pharma marketing has got disrupted. How does one make sense of all this? I mean, this industry goes through a lot of these changes very dynamically. How are leaders grappling with this? What gets discussed at your levels? Do you factor all these things in your futuristic strat plan process? How does it go, Kamlesh? I want to hear your top line views.
So
For our
I would like to give this reference to basis on my understanding rather than my
please.
organization,
Yeah,
because we as leaders have to think for ourselves. Like no, first, like no, whether
correct.
the organization thinks or not is secondary. But if I have to be relevant in this particular field, I have to think about it. So
Absolutely.
I would say that no, that we should not be taking a follower strategy in this place. We should be actually taking a step of thinking which are those services which probably can we do it first time by ourselves, In other words, this is the kind of innovation probably an Indian organization can do it better. Because multinationals are governed by regulations and they have to take a lot of approvals. Even for a patient support program, it's going to be taking a hell a lot of a time and a pain. But I think Indian organizations should be jumping at it at this point of time. First is that no, there is actually going to be a different world emerging when we all come out of this COVID, because there are enlightened boardrooms and enlightened leaderships and enlightened customer base also. For example, I would like to say, what have you got? The P&Ls have been quite favorable for the past 1.5 years because of the reason that the people have not moved to the market. So there's a travel cost which has come down. The P&L has been favorable because the marketing cost, what has been budgeted, had not been spent. It's across the industry. You can find
Spent.
good amount of gains in the P&L. Now, when we have seen what we could have not been done for decades, which can happen within 1 year, I don't think any management or top management or company is going to lie by saying that let's go back to the old word and dilute my P&L. So first is the resistance is going to come from there. It's a valid resistance because everybody would like to safeguard their income. So when you're going to do this at this point of time, that yes, let me keep the bottom line intact, the percentages intact, and try to make the shift, you will find that there are a lot of things which will need to be changed. And the only solution is what you said just now. Like, no, all these digital solutions are going to come automatically into the fray of getting selected. Uh, One is actually the probably how will you give a teleconsultation platform to your doctor, to your set of customers, first to think about. Second is that, no, that how will you try to reach your services to the doctor without that of a rep digitally. How do you customize content using how do you customize the content of what a doctor wants to hear and a speaker he wants to hear and bring him to his house, rather than actually thinking about the old environment of conferences are not going to be back. Even if it's going to be back, they are not going to be successful. Probably for once or twice, fine, but still the management right now of what I would like to chew, I would like to eat is something which is going to be given to the doctor. And this is going to, so this all requires digital platforms. So, for example, as you rightly said, digital CMEs, digital conferences are not, I should say, are not a big hit because the excitement is different when you are actually having a face-to-face conferences. It's not replacing the way it wanted, but I'm sure that the medical content is reaching the doctors what is required. Services are reaching the doctor what's required. There is going to be inhibition of meeting the rep the same way as what they've been doing before. So there is going to be more. I would say that 20% of tele detailing will stay. It might not take a little bit more than that because it is a question of whether the doctor has to give time to a company itself is actually becoming a big question mark. It's not a, if you're face to face, there's a compulsion to meet. If you're not face to face, whether there is a compulsion to listen to a company is actually a choice of a customer. So whether these choices can be triggered, whether these choices can be fulfilled, or there are other ways of doing it is something which is to be. I think multi-channel marketing is actually one way of the push model and the pull model. Both the MCM and the omni channels have to be very active, and these are the ones which actually probably people are trying to vet out and try to create that web of services which I said. Today, I could say, Shailesh, while we always think about the retailer, we also are now thinking about like, no, how much percentage online is actually grabbing. And those online channels are also having a choice of giving a variety of offers in terms of replacing your brand itself. So, is it actually a threat or it is actually a gift? Is something which you have to think about because your data is getting exposed. And now these online channels are also getting into diagnosis partnership. You've seen those takeovers happening in the last. So there's a lot happening in this place. I think as wise organizations in the domestic players, we have to embrace all these channels, make your choices, not fail prey or try to develop the capability within. That's where probably intelligence lies because it's going to take a huge effort to fulfill each and every kind of an intersection. So you need a kind of a partnership and collaboration with a set of digital partners, and that's what the you need a person who is there in the marketing who is able to bring these collaborations. And again, these collaborations are very fancy, and these things need not be there for all the brands. It may be particularly required for a set of mature brands in a different manner, kind of a growth brands in a different manner, and for a decline set of brands in a different manner. But getting all this at head office is normally what we think is that how do you get these services attached to products which deserve it, and how can we actually take this to the last mile and try to execute it to the outcomes what has been promised is something which is actually being a check. But I think out of every 10 attempts domestic organization is making, probably around say about 3 to 4 wither out, and 4 or 5 stay. Some of the ones which are actually very successful are the outsourced models where teams, because of the constraint of the P&Ls, the teams are getting downsized. So it goes to outsourcing of different outsourced field forces which are working. Incentivization of the channel through kind of agencies. That's also happening for your brand to be more focused, and more P by D is being created. So there are a lot of, I think, at least around 12 to 13 solutions are already in the system, which is actually prevailing and doing well. Making a choice of this is going to be a big task from the boardroom side.
Wow, you actually answered my next question about the digital piece, which is the way. But I think talking about the channel, the customer, the content, and talking about creating a powerful ecosystem and collaboration, and all that stuff to make these things happen, and enabling it through capability development, what you so beautifully said, has actually answered my my next question. So I want to come to the last piece of our discussion, because I want to respect your time. You have given us 50 minutes of your time. It's been a wonderful discussion that I've enjoyed so far. I want to ask you a question which can be a little tricky, because both of us have been in the same role as business heads. So I don't know how things have changed now, but I want to see from the other side, and no better person than you who has been there and done that. You've had great sales experience. You now had marketing experience. You're now a cluster head. You have both marketing and sales people reporting into you, correct? The marketing guy strategizing, building demand for the product, positioning, the real strat work. Salespeople are the revenue generators. They are getting the dollars into the organization. They are paying for our allowances. And I respect the sales. We respect our sales guys so tremendously, because they keep the lights on in our offices. Now, Kamalesh, the situation is you have a business head position opening up in your cluster, right? And this is something completely, there is no talent mapping or competence. It's just from a marketing and commercial operations. You have to fill out that position. So it could be the sales guy who's vying for it. It's a marketing guy. And why I'm asking this question is because a lot of marketing viewers in our community, they want to aspire, and obviously for them the vertical growth is BU head role, handling sales. They don't have sales experience, but they still aspire to be BU heads. Okay, and that's why you said very clearly marketing people should get sales stints at some point of time in their career, and I am a firm believer, right? That should happen. How do you then decide who gets I know there is competency mapping, there is a job posting, an assessment center. Those are great things. But honestly, when you work with a leader, when put your heart and soul in it, what makes you take a decision on those critical attributes? I just wanted to hear. Is it the size of the business, or is it obviously you as a leader what do you want, Kamlesh? You want the best man to be fit for that job, right? How do you make those decisions? Because this messages for our marketers is very important. Anybody and everybody can't get into such roles, right? That's why I wanted.
It's a great question, and I think people may have different views out of it. Sure. I'm giving you my point of view is let's try and understand.
Right.
If I'm having let's take an example. If I'm having around 4 to 5 divisions, and each division is in multiple therapy areas at different levels of maturity, I'm getting a post which needs to be filled. First is that I need to understand, I don't need to understand the person. I need to understand the division first. I normally treat it like that. Now, what does the division require? Does it require a people head? Does it require a marketing head? It requires a combination of both. And even if it's a combination of both, does it require a growth driver? Does it require actually a consolidator? Or does it require a kind of a person who's actually supposed to build only value out of a declining growth portfolio. So first is that, that let's try and understand what the division is want, because the traits, according to me, the traits are I'm always considered as actually a growth driver. I'll give you my example. Is never a person tries to put me into a consolidation job. They always put into. I have never had assignments which are less than 25% growth. So that's actually how they see me. There are certain probably competencies or the way we try to drive things. That drive will actually lead you to the kind of job which you want to make. So first is we have to understand what the division requires. Do you require a growth driver? Putting a growth driver into a kind of a consolidation post is going to be building a lot of frustration into the guy. So we need to get, we first let's understand whether you want growth or whether you want to manage a mature portfolio or you want to make a consolidation portfolio. Second is the size of the team, whether it requires a people leader or it requires a strategy expert. So, for example, task forces are typically the ones which probably you had also handled before. Also, they're all task forces which requires high science, high strategy, and man-by-man marking. That requires, so a marketing guy who's very experienced can immediately try and move to these type of levels to make sure that that he juggles himself to understand, and I'm sure that if he does well there, he will not be denied a bigger organization of which has got larger number of people, because traits just appear. You know how we handle smaller team or bigger team, it's all the same. It's a question of decisions. So for a marketeer, I think it's actually going in that level will be easier. But selections of so try to pose, if you are actually trying to pose yourself as a business unit head in any place, try to understand more about the job rather than posing yourself openly on a zero based approach. You need to understand the challenge of the division. You should understand the component which is available in public domain. Make some good research on how the company has performed, and if you see the 5 years performance of the division, you'll really understand what are the pain points of that particular it's necessary for us to have this research done, and then try to see whether your competencies of what you're having within is actually essentials for making the change. That's actually how you have to showcase yourself to the person who's selecting. Also map yourself with the, and most of the time you will find also when there is a mapping problem, you can still understand that the chances of you getting it is going to be not so high. But most of the time this wins. Try to understand what are the competencies required for the assignment, not for the post. That's something which needs to be. It's the same thing for marketing also.
Try and figure out what are the competencies required for the assignment and not for the post.
Yes.
First point, what you said, Kamalesh, beautifully is your perception in the organization. If you are a growth driver, seek that assignment which gives you to exhibit that competencies of growth driver. Absolutely. Not get into a consolidation kind of a role just because you want to be a BU held by figure, nominated figure, but you really should exercise that mandate. Brilliantly put, Kamlesh. That is why I wanted to ask you this question on my series, because you have seen both sides, and now as a very balanced leader, whatever I've seen you in the last so many years, 15 years I've known you, I think this was what I was expecting from you, Kamlesh. It's been fantastic talking to you. I mean, I am so much delighted to see the various nuggets of thought processes, very clear, and what you have communicated in terms of marketing, your journey, sales excellence piece, your learnings in marketing. How do you do transition between two different sets of organizations, multinationals, Indian organizations, your advice to marketeers, and lastly, if you want to aspire for growth into divisional head roles or P&L roles, you have beautifully said is mapping yourself against the requirements of the position or the assignment and not just what is required for that role. So I think you have said that very nice. So we've come before I sign off, Kamlesh, I think it will only be apt if I request you to give some very, very nice closing messages or take-home messages, whatever comes to you for our marketeers community, which comprises of brand managers, brand heads, marketing heads, but also a lot of business P&L heads also watch our shows because they are also keen to understand different aspects of marketing. So if you could kindly help us.
I think the times which we are running are our I should say curriculum is changing completely. There is a good chance for us to believe whether we are good or we are not good. I think instead of making our thoughts of whether we are good or not good at this point of time, just keep a careful watch on the ecosystem. I would always tell that, like, there are a lot of changes happening in this ecosystem. You listen to a lot of people who are doing great work in micro projects. Try to learn from them and get to know what fits your story. Because at this point of time, it's not that your intellect or your exposure or your competence are going to help. It's necessary for you to understand what works for you at this point of time. And when I'm telling this, I'm also meaning myself. We need to have now a zero-based approach. We have to reset ourselves. I would rather put that word that no, just go and put the reset button. Try to actually think about a different time frame. Let the point of departure be now, and let the point of arrival be also decided by you of any assignment where you are right now, and then try to probably mark those milestones. And for marking those milestones, it's not the same milestones what we had with the hardware which we had 1 year back. You have to have the new software updated in you, and try to put the milestones in such a manner that know that you are able to understand that the journey is going to be perfect. And we have to be very clear also. We should know how to erase it, because what we are writing right now is not the right story. It's going to keep on changing. After around 2 years or 3 years, you might have a different pharma industry altogether, which probably has got a lot more changes, which probably you're not witness. So even 3 year plans are going to be very long. So in short, reset. Make sure that know that you have a new time frame. Create new milestones with the current ecosystem in mind, and try to mark yourself for any changes during